It's really striking how often Singapore pops up right at the center of these big regional summits.
Yeah, especially development forums, anything about innovation in Southeast Asia.
Exactly.
Right.
So, okay, let's try and unpack this a bit. What happens, or what could happen, when a huge player like the Gates Foundation channels so much of its regional work through Singapore?
Right. What are the maybe unintended consequences?
Yeah. We want to look at potential shifts, power dynamics across the region. We'll touch on health systems, agriculture.
Just power, too, in those bigger trade and sustainability frameworks.
Our mission for you, listening, is really to get a handle on how this philanthropic focus might be subtly reshaping things across Southeast Asia.
It's this interesting mix, isn't it? Significant funding meets this very, very developed, digitally savvy nation. So today we're diving into how that concentration of influence centered in Singapore might sort of ripple outwards.
Okay, so let's start with health. Digital health IDs, pandemic tracking tools.
Yeah.
The foundation supports these.
And Singapore's the ideal test bed, right?
Seems like it. Great digital infrastructure. People are generally okay with centralized governance.
But here's the crunch, isn't it?
Yeah, this is where it gets really interesting. How does that Singapore model actually work when you try to apply it in, say, Indonesia or Vietnam? Very different conditions.
That's such a critical question in the context. What works in Singapore with its robust digital setup and governance?
Might hit roadblocks elsewhere.
Totally. I think one of the sources mentioned a pilot in Vietnam struggling connectivity issues in rural parts.
Right.
So it raises that flag. Does a one-size-fits-all approach actually end up creating gaps or leaving people behind if they're not digitally connected?
And then there's the surveillance angle, potentially.
Well, yeah. In countries maybe with weaker democratic checks or fewer digital safeguards, could these health systems become something else? It's a valid concern.
Okay, let's pivot from health to agriculture, also crucial.
Big area for the foundation, agri-tech investment.
Yeah, things like climate-smart monoculture, GM seeds, often launched via Singapore's startup scene, right?
But think downstream. What's the knock-on effect for, local farmers in Cambodia or the Philippines?
Are we talking patented seeds, expensive inputs?
That's part of the risk. Creates dependency, maybe, especially with loan-based models, a bad harvest or shifting prices.
And suddenly farmers are in debt.
It touches on that whole idea of food sovereignty, doesn't it? Are these newer, perhaps more efficient models accidentally undermining traditional farming knowledge or local seed diversity?
It's a tension there. Okay, building on this idea of influence, let's talk soft power.
Ah, yes. Singapore as a regional policy influencer.
They host trainings, forums for ministries. They kind of shape the definition of progress, yeah.
They absolutely do. It's a hub. Policy ideas showcased there, promoted there. They get traction.
So could neighboring countries feel a bit pressured?
It's subtle, probably. But yeah, if you're participating in these initiatives, funded by big global players, championed by a regional leader,
You might feel you need to align your national strategies, even if it's not a perfect fit locally.
precisely, even if it doesn't quite mesh with your specific circumstances on the ground.
Okay, then lastly, these big frameworks. Trade, sustainability. Singapore's plugged into the WTO, the WEF.
Right, global platforms. So it can become an advocate for certain modern models.
Like synthetic meat, digital agriculture, carbon offsetting.
Those kinds of things. But again, you have to ask.
Who benefits most?
Exactly. Equity is the question. These innovations sound great globally, but locally, the impact can be uneven.
How so?
Well, new compliance rules, market demands, they often favor the big players, right? Multinational corporations with the resources to adapt quickly.
Potentially marginalizing small producers, indigenous communities.
It's a definite risk. They might lack the capital or the infrastructure to keep up with new regimes.
So just to be clear, we're not saying the Gates Foundation has bad intentions here.
Not at all. The aims are almost certainly positive, improving health, boosting agriculture.
But it's the sheer scale of the influence.
Combined with Singapore's strategic position, it creates this powerful dynamic.
A ripple effect across ASEAN that really needs careful watching.
Yeah, careful consideration.
Which brings us to a final thought for you, listening. When you see this kind of concentration of power, even philanthropic power, it raises a fundamental question, doesn't it? Who ultimately gets to define development, define progress for Southeast Asia? It's something really worth thinking about as these influential projects continue to shape the region around you.